Yo, what's going on, guys? It's C-Brev. Welcome to another MLB The Show 22 video. In this video, we're going to be breaking down all of the faces of the franchise cards that you can acquire through this program at launch, giving my opinions on which ones I think are good and bad, and giving you all my best advice on who you should take out of the choice packs. Before we jump into it, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more content like this. Now, the structure of obtaining these cards is a lot different than in years past with Team Affinity. Throughout this program, which essentially functions like an inning program in years past, you'll be able to earn 6 random non-sellable cards, 1 from each division, and you will also be able to earn 6 choice packs, 1 from each division, where you can choose the card you want and this card will be sellable. So this means that you can't directly earn all 30 cards from the program, but you can still get all 30 assuming you have the stubs to buy the ones that come from the choice packs. So in years past, we've looked at all 30 cards, we've ranked them in tiers. I'm not going to do that for this program because of how it's structured and how you obtain them. Instead, we're going to go division by division. I'm going to give my thoughts on each card, and then I'm going to give my advice on which one you should take out of the choice pack since you only get one. So without further ado, let's start with the AL West. So the AL West, I think, is possibly the most loaded division. Actually, all 5 of these cards are good. I think it's really awesome that this is the first random non-sellable card that you get because all 5 are definitely usable at this point in the year. Let's take a look at each individual card, starting with this Kyle Tucker. This card is honestly insanely good. This is one of the best outfielders in the game right now for sure. Extremely balanced hitting stats, over 80 power both sides, and gets diamond fielding in right field at only parallel 2, which takes like no time at all. This card is really good and maybe one of the more underrated cards in the release for sure. Next, we have everyone's baby, Mike Trout. Obviously, Mike Trout cards are always really good. The reverse splits always play extremely well just because you face right-handed pitching more than you face left-handed pitching, so the splits on this card are amazing. An underrated part about this Trout card too is that he actually maintains his silver defense in the outfield if you want to play him in the corners, and so depending on your outfield setup, you can actually play someone who's much better defensively in center field and then just throw Mike Trout in right or left. This is obviously one of the best cards in the release as well. Can never really go wrong with a Mike Trout card. Next, we move on to Sean Murphy, which is an interesting card. I think he's probably bottom of the barrel for this division, but one thing is for sure, if this guy's playing catcher for you, nobody's gonna steal on you. So on top of having 98 arm strength and 99 reaction stock, this card also has the catcher pop time quirk, which is gonna allow you to throw out base runners even faster. This is easily the best defensive catcher in the entire game right now. Obviously leaves a bit to be desired at the plate with the contact, but overall I think this is a solid card as well, especially since most people will be playing on All-Star in the early weeks of ranked season, so the contact isn't as big of a deal. Also another card in the release that, dare I say, is underrated. The defense on this guy is just crazy good. On to Mitch Haniger, another really solid card from the AL West. Insane hitting splits versus lefties. Unfortunately, you won't face lefties too often. It's basically just going to be Randy Johnson at the beginning of the year, but still holds his own versus righties. 75-94 is pretty good for a launch week. A bit slow for the outfield, definitely not a 5-tool player by any means, but a thumper of a bat for your lineup. And finally, we have Corey Seager, which is another crazy good card. Having a left-handed hitting middle infielder early in the year is really valuable, and this card can play 3 positions. This card isn't even really that bad at shortstop early in the year because relative to other cards, his defense isn't that far behind. Obviously, if you want to hide the defense, then I think third base is the best spot for him, but overall, this is just a card that's going to add a crazy bat to your lineup early in the year. Perfectly balanced, really good splits at the plate, an amazing swing, and he has the dead red quirk, which is one of the best in the game. So just looking at all 5 of these cards objectively from this pack, I think you're honestly happy with whatever card you get that's non-sellable and random. I think if you get Mike Trout, Corey Seager, or Kyle Tucker, you are jumping for joy. Those are 3 of the best cards in the game right now, especially for no money spent players. But even if you do land on Sean Murphy or Mitch Haniger, they are more than serviceable starters for this point in the year. And again, just want to say I'm mostly speaking from the perspective of someone who doesn't have the live series collection done, since that's most players right now. If you do have all the collections done, then most of these cards probably aren't going to crack your starting lineup, but for everyone else, they're really good. I think the biggest downer out of this pack is probably getting Sean Murphy as your non-sellable, only because he can only play catcher, so you're basically forced to play him. But even then, he's still a really good early game catcher, and if you already bought a catcher off the market or something, you can turn around and just sell them and get your stubs back. But overall, this is probably the best division, and you're gonna be happy with whatever non-sellable card you get. As far as the choice pack, when you get there, I think it's a toss-up between Mike Trout and Corey Seager. I know passing up on a Mike Trout card this early in the year is probably crazy, but my personal one-time pick from this division would be Corey Seager. He brings a lot to the table that you'll struggle to find with other cards at this point in the year. Again, just a well-balanced left-handed thumper infielder with good active quirks. He just barely edges out Mike Trout for me. It's really close, and honestly, if you wanted to take Kyle Tucker too, I wouldn't blame you. We kind of run into a problem, which I'll talk about with multiple divisions, that there's just a ton of outfielders you can go with right now in the game, and you can only start 3 of them. And so personally, I just think you get a little bit more value out of Corey Seager, so he would be my one choice. If your non-sellable card ends up being Corey Seager, then I would definitely look at Mike Trout or Kyle Tucker out of your choice pack. And for each division, I'll be talking about whether you should keep or sell your choice pack card. I think this is a division where you definitely should keep. Having 2 of these 5 cards is going to bolster your lineup immensely early in the year. Going from the best division to possibly the worst division, we go from the AL West to the NL West. A lot of the cards in this division are just kind of average. Starting off with Carson Kelly, I think this card is okay. He's basically Mitch Haniger with like -20 in both hitting stats versus right. Again, you face righties more than lefties, so these splits aren't really ideal, especially for a catcher who you want to be starting every single game. Card is saved a little bit in that he has third base secondary, so he does have a little bit of versatility where someone like Sean Murphy does not, but overall not terribly impressed with this card. Also has 0 active quirks, which doesn't help. On to CJ Cron, again just kind of a worse version of Mitch Haniger, and basically you can only play him at first base. He does technically have positional versatility, but I would not play 70 fielding and 36 speed in the corner outfield. And this is just a recurring theme with this division, unfortunately. A lot of these cards are just missing something to make them like a pure starter. Obviously, if you land on this Cron, you can get away with starting him, but he doesn't have a ton of longevity in the fact that there's just going to be better first basemen that come out really soon. Not terribly impressed with this card either, but I guess he's solid for where we're at. On to Cody Bellinger, who I think is the best individual card in this division. He's basically Kyle Tucker with a lot less contact versus left, but he makes up for it with arm strength and speed in the outfield. Bellinger also has a really good swing that this community likes a lot over the years. Again, you only need to get him to parallel 2 to get diamond defense in right field, so that's something to take note of. It's very easy to get, upgrades the card a lot, and Bellinger obviously has the flexibility to be played at first if you want to, so a much better flex than someone like Cron. Overall, just a good launch day card. I think this is the best card in the division on paper. On to Jake Cronenworth, who I think is a really decent card as well. He's just a really solid option. He doesn't blow me away, but he does everything really well. Obviously, he's got better hitting stats versus right, which is important. Gold defense at second base and good speed, and then obviously can play anywhere in the infield except for catcher. Another card that I think is pretty underrated for the release in general. I don't think you're too upset if you end up with this guy as your non-sellable card, but he's not someone I would take out of the choice pack. And I just wanted to show you guys this comparison really quick. He's basically the same exact card as the pre-order Diamond Chase Utley, which is a good thing because I thought that Utley looks pretty good. You can see how close their splits are. Cronenworth gains a lot in speed, Utley gains a lot in fielding, and their hitting stats are basically identical, so a really solid card. And finally, we got our first pitcher to take a look at, which is Logan Webb, who I think is the second best individual card in this division. He's got really good pitches. Obviously, sinker, cutter, slider, changeup, four seam is a really good repertoire. Great control early in the year, decent hits per 9. Also has max break on his sinker and his changeup, and his slider break is really strong. Overall, this is a really good starting pitcher card, especially for launch week. His speed differentials leave a bit to be desired, but you can kind of make up for that with the fact that a lot of his pitches move in different directions. Starting pitchers are pretty important early in the year as well, because when you dive into ranked, you're going to want to have 5 of them that are at least decent, so each one that you can knock out one at a time obviously helps your team out a lot. So let's talk about the non-sellable pack and the choice pack for this division. I think if you land on Carson Kelly or CJ Cron, you're a bit upset if that's your non-sellable card. You could make it work. You could platoon Carson Kelly even at third base, and you could just straight up start CJ Cron, but unfortunately, because they're not all around balanced cards and they're kind of pigeonholed into certain positions, I think they are the lesser of the cards in this pack. I think if you land on Bellinger or Logan Webb for your non-sellable card, you are jumping for joy, and I think if you land on Cronenworth, you're feeling pretty okay about it. As far as the choice pack goes, I think there's one solid number 1 choice for this, and that would be Logan Webb, even though I said he's the second best card in the division. Again, outfield is really deep, and it's important to get 5 good starting pitchers right away, and Logan Webb is a really good starting pitcher. So from the choice pack, he's going to be my pick over Bellinger. However, I definitely think this is a division where you could make the argument to just sell the card. If you consider the fact that you can take the card out of this choice pack and go and buy someone from another division, such as the AL West that we just went over, I think that's more than viable. Again, definitely a division where you could sell the card from the choice pack, but my choice if I were to keep them would be Logan Webb. But this division overall just really doesn't excite me. I'm basically just hoping to land on Bellinger or Webb for my non-sellable card. card, and then hopefully I can sell the other one. On to the AL East, which is a middle of the road division in my opinion. A couple of cards that really excite me and a couple of cards that do not excite me at all. Let's start off with CEDRIC MULLINS, which is a community favorite. This card is insanely good for early in the year, especially with the swing that he has that a lot of people love. Kind of has the same thing going for him that Mike Trout does, where if you play him in the corner outfield, he doesn't actually drop a defensive shield. He's still going to maintain gold defense out there with 82 speed, going to be really solid. He also has better arm strength than they gave him last year, which is a plus because that was one of the biggest knocks against him. And his active quirks are completely insane. He has both dead red and breaking ball hitter, which is the best combination of quirks that you can have. He's basically going to have boosted stats on every pitch. Again, another card that's a top outfield option in the game, so you're really going to have to decide how you want to work through your outfield since you can only start 3 of them, and there are so many good ones right now. This is definitely one of them. On to RAFAEL Devers, who's kind of in the same boat as Corey Seager, but a little bit lower in terms of power level for me. The big knock against this card compared to Seager is that he can't play in the middle infield. However, hitting wise, he's much better than Seager against righties, and again, a card that a lot of people love using throughout the years. Just to say, if you did start this card, I wouldn't platoon him. I think 85-65 early in the year versus lefties is more than good enough. In general, you probably don't want to platoon these non-sellable cards that you get anyway, since you want to get value out of them. But this is a good card. There's nothing to really complain about aside from maybe the defense, but again, he plays third or first where defense isn't as important, and a ton of power and contact versus right, which is super important all the time. Alright, on to Aroldis Chapman and his absolutely insane hits per 9 and K per 9. It's worth noting that this Chapman does not have outlier on his four-seam fastball, so he's only going to be throwing it at 99. And at this point, I want to talk about the bullpen dynamics early in the year. Early game bullpen depth is kind of a paradox because you need to fill it out just in case you need them, but most games you actually aren't going to use your bullpen, especially early in the year, so it's kind of a weird thing. You really want good guys in the back end bullpen for you just in case you're in a close game, but most of the time they're not going to get used. It's very strange. I always like saying you don't need good bullpen arms until you do. So this is a weird one. As far as lefty relievers go, which is by far the scarcest position in the game right now, this is probably the best one, but it's up to you whether you want to spend your choice pack on a left-handed reliever or someone in the bullpen rather than someone that you can use every single game. Again, bullpen is really scarce right now, not just with lefties, but in general. There aren't even that many diamond cards you can even use in your bullpen, so the fact that you can get one from this face of the franchise program is important to note, and obviously with those per 9s, he's going to be one of the best ones out there. And finally, wrapping up the division with the 2 cards that don't really excite me at all, we're starting off with FRANCO, who just doesn't have good enough stats versus righties. I think this card is fine if you get him as your non-sellable. I know a lot of people love his swing. Personally, I love his cards too, but those attributes versus righties just aren't good enough, especially for someone that you're going to be starting every game. And ALEK MANOAH wrapping it up. So he's got pretty good hits per 9, actually really good hits per 9. 99 is pretty high, but his pitch mix just doesn't excite me. The difference between him and Logan Webb is that Logan Webb has a sinker primary and also a cutter, whereas this card does not have a cutter. He also has significantly less break on his sinker. You're going to be throwing a lot of sliders with this card, and his speed differentials aren't terribly good. He doesn't throw very hard, and he basically only has 2 speeds. This is a very middle of the road starting pitcher for me right now. Also worth mentioning that his delivery in game is extremely easy to read from a hitter's perspective. So now let's go over the choice pack for this division. So I've got good news and bad news. The good news is for your non-sellable random card, you can actually make do with any of these 5 cards. I know I kind of bagged on Wander and MANOAH a little bit, but if you do land on them for your non-sellable card, there are places where you can play them and start them. Obviously, Wander's a switch hitter with good positional versatility, good defense, good speed, and going back to the fact that you need up to 5 good starting pitchers early in the year to kind of fill out your rotation. MANOAH's not that bad either for a non-sellable card. However, I think if you land on Mullins or Chapman, you are jumping for joy. These are some of the best cards in the game right now, I think. And Devers is pretty good as well. So when you open your non-sellable pack, you're really praying for Chapman, Mullins, or Devers. Chapman obviously being the best one for non-sellable. If you get a non-sellable left-handed reliever and then have the choice of the next card, that's completely insane. You basically won the lottery. Now the bad news is the choice pack is going to be a really difficult decision. I do think this is a division where you want to keep the card that you take out of the choice pack just to make your team better. And for me personally, out of the choice pack, you could make an argument for any of these 3 guys: CEDRIC, Mullins, Rafael Devers, Aroldis Chapman. For me personally, even though it feels bad game to game, the best long-term move is to take Chapman from the choice pack. I think he's going to be on your team for the longest out of any of these cards. This Chapman card has legitimate potential to be in your bullpen for like 6 months. That's not even an exaggeration. And so even though I won't use him every single game, even though he's probably going to throw 1 to 2 innings every other game for me, I still think he has the most value from the pick. And so my choice is going to be Chapman out of the choice pack. However, I do think Mullins and Devers are really good as well. Specifically, Mullins is insane. Can't stress enough how good those active quirks are. And this is definitely a division where you could consider parlaying your stubs from another division. So I just talked about how the NOS doesn't have many cards that blow you away, and you could easily sell the card from that choice pack. Well, you could sell that card, turn around and buy yourself a Mullins, and then choose Chapman out of the pack if you were unfortunate enough to not get either of them as your random. So a lot to think about here, a lot to unpack, but to just summarize, my pick is going to be Chapman. I think you can't go wrong with Devers or Mullins. On to the NL East, which is another really good division. All the cards in this division are pretty solid. Starting off with Acuna, this card is a little bit weird. Obviously, Acuna is loved by the community and his cards always play really well, but objectively, attribute-wise, this card's actually a worse hitter than Mitch Haniger out of the AOS pack, and his defense is pretty bad. The big downer with his defense is that he's got a center field primary, so even though he hits silver fielding at parallel 1, you're still basically forced to play him in center field to maintain that. The speed's gonna make up for it a little bit. Obviously 90 speed is really good, but this card is just kind of a weird one for me because he's balanced so weirdly, right? He's got so much power, so much speed, but everything else is really lacking. Don't get me wrong, I think it's a really good card, but he's not the pick out of this division for me. Moving on to Jazz Chisholm, which, spoiler alert, this is in my opinion the best card in the entire release. This is the best card in the division. Obviously this card is completely insane. He's a left-handed hitting second baseman, which we already talked about earlier is super important, and he comes stock with diamond defense and 91 speed. This card is going to play the best defensive second base in the entire game for you, and his hitting stat distribution is really strong. Obviously pretty balanced except more power versus right, which is what you want to see. Amazing positional versatility and the fact that he can play shortstop and third base, and then obviously a good swing as well. One knock on this guy, only one active quirk, but as far as attribute distribution goes, this card is really insanely good for launch week. Can't stress enough how good I think this card is. I think he should be in everyone's lineups if you're looking for the best team possible, unless you've completed the live series collection and just prefer someone else. On to Lindor, who is also a pretty good card, basically baby Jazz. Worst contact versus right, a little bit better power versus right, maxed out fielding and reaction, which is sick, but unfortunately with that arm strength, it's going to be hard to play him at shortstop. 68 is kind of a noodle arm for the infield, especially at a position like short, which really needs the arm strength, and he's nowhere close to as fast as Jazz, so he's not going to be able to cover as much ground on the slow rollers and the balls up the middle. Overall, this is a really solid to good card for me. Obviously, the fact that he's a switch hitter is really strong, but to me, he's the same hitter and much worse defensively than Jazz is. JT Realmuto now, a really solid catcher option, which I think you're not too disappointed in having if it's your non-sellable card. Balance at the plate, 98 arm strength, and also has the catcher pop time quirk, so again, you're going to be throwing out base stealers like it's nothing. Really fast for a catcher too, 85 speed, so again, for a launch week catcher, I keep saying that word, but for a launch week catcher, this is a really solid option. This division overall just has really good cards. And finally, Josh Bell, just an absolutely amazing thumper switch hitting bat. Not a ton of positional versatility, kind of same place as Crone where he can play the outfield technically, but I would never use him there. But as far as bats go, this is a top tier bat. I mean, look at those splits with the switch hitting. That's a lot of contact and power. So overall, I think this division is the one you're most excited to open your pack for the non-sellable card. Any of these 5 cards are going to be day 1 starters for you if you're no money spent. All 5 of them are really good. I think you're most disappointed if you get Josh Bell just because you have to play him at first, and that kind of eliminates the ability for you to use any other card at first base, but still would be a really solid option. You can't go wrong with any of these 5 cards. For your choice pack, I think it's pretty definitive that I'm going to be taking Jazz Chisholm. I think you could more than make the argument for Acuna and Lindor as well. I'm not a big fan of taking Realmuto out of the choice pack just because you can get catchers elsewhere, specifically Joe Mauer, which you can buy on the market. But yeah, I'm gonna be slapping Jazz at second base and just leaving him there for a month or 2, and it's gonna be a good time. But obviously taking Acuna, taking Lindor, wouldn't blame me at all. this division I would definitely keep the card, and I'm going to be keeping Jazz. 2 divisions left now. We're on to the AL Central. Starting off with Luis Robert, who is an insanely good card. If he was in a different division, he would be the no-brainer pick. Unfortunately, he's in a division with another center fielder that does a lot of what he does. Do not get it twisted, though. This card is so good, man. Again, diamond defense at parallel 2. He's going to have 95 speed when you get there. His splits at the plate are really strong. If you compare him to someone like Jazz, who we just talked about, even stock, he's got 8 more contact versus right and the same power, and that's his weaker card, right? If you end up queuing into Randy Johnson, this card's going to pop off. Someone brings Chapman out of the pen, this card's going to pop off. I've said it a couple times this video, but I think this is the definitive most underrated card in the release. This card is so good. This division is going to make for some really tough choices when we get to the choice pack. On to Emmanuel CLASE. Again, we've talked about earlier how important it is to get good bullpen arms in there early, just in case you need them. This is one of them. This is probably the worst reliever card in this release, but he's still extremely solid. 106 hits per 9. He does have outlier on his cutter. The big knock on this card for me, just from facing his finest card last year, is that he's only got 2 speeds, and the slider's not slow enough from the cutter to really get someone to swing and miss on it if there's sitting cutter. So this is a weird one for me. I've already stressed how important good bullpen arms are, but I don't know if this card is completely necessary. And moving on to 2 cards which don't excite me a lot. First one is Casey Mize, which is a real bummer because I've really liked his cards in the past. This card's maybe a little bit better than I'm giving off the impression of right now, but just because he's in the AL Central, which is a really tough division to make a choice on, I think it's kind of hard to justify picking him. He's got 94 break on the sinker and max break on the splitter, but what really disappoints me about this card is that he now has a curveball, whereas in years past he had a slurve. I think that's a big difference. And again, he's kind of got the same problem as ALEK MANOAH. This card is basically ALEK MANOAH, but with a curveball. If he had a slurve instead, it would be a much different story, but this is a solid starter, but just not someone I'm keying on to buy from the market or take out of my choice pack. And we've got Andrew Benintendi now, who is the most middle of the road card in the release. I think there's just nothing terribly exciting about this guy. You're gonna have to play him with silver defense and left. He's got average speed, average hitting. Just doesn't really blow me away in any category. With how deep outfield is, I just don't see how you could justify taking this card or starting him. And finally, we're on to my baby, Byron Buxton. This is one of my favorite cards in the game every single year. I know what you're thinking, the 60 contact, but he makes up for it in other areas. This is a card where I'm going to talk about longevity again. Even if he's not hitting for you, this Buxton card is going to have 99 fielding, 99 reaction, and 99 speed in center field for the rest of the year. You know, I hate using the term in game, but by definition those fielding stats are end game, and we're in launch week 1, so I don't see how you can make the argument that this isn't the best card in the division. And in addition to that, I mentioned how he makes up for his contact in other areas. He does have the best combination of active quirks, dead red, and breaking ball hitter together, so he's gonna play way above his attributes at the plate. This is one of the best cards in the release. I think this is a must-have outfielder, even though it's a deep position, and that's why it makes me so sad that Luis Robert is in the same division. Talking about the packs now, I think this is going to be one of the most emotionally charged non-sellable packs that you could open, probably the most. The reason I say it's going to be emotionally charged is because you're either going to be extremely happy or bottom of the barrel disappointed, depending on who you pull for your random non-sellable card. There are 4 cards in this division that you are not upset about pulling at all. Even Casey Mize is good to throw in your rotation early on. Personally, I think if you pull any of Buxton, CLASE, or Robert, you are jumping for joy. All 3 of those cards are insanely good for non-sellables to just throw in your no money spent team. And I think if you pull Benintendi from your non-sellable pack, you're probably going to want to cry. So let's do us all a favor and just don't pull Benintendi, and then we'll all be happy. How does that sound? For the choice pack, I'm sure you can probably guess that my definitive choice from the choice pack is Byron Buxton. I think you should keep the card from this division. If you are lucky enough to pull Buxton as your non-sellable card, I would immediately look at either CLASE or Robert for your choice card. And honestly, this is another division where you could sell off pieces from other divisions and try to pick up an extra card from this one because so many of them are good. But yeah, Buxton's the move for me. I don't think it's really close. He's going to have the most longevity for me. CLASE and Robert are a close second. And finally, we have the NL Central, which is a middle of the road division that doesn't excite me a whole lot. First, taking a look at Marcus Stroman. This is maybe the second or third best starter in the release, but still not a terribly exciting card. The big knock on this card for me is the speed differentials. He only has 7 mile-an-hour difference difference between his fastest pitch and his slowest pitch, and everything else is in between. This card's going to be a machine for not being able to strike people out because they just keep fouling off pitches. I think it's going to be frustrating. But even saying that, this is more than a viable starting pitcher option early on and a pretty decent card. Looking at Joey Votto now, another weird one. This kind of looks like a platoon, but I mentioned earlier that you don't really want to platoon the cards you get from here if you can help it. 89-108 is so good, and I mentioned earlier that you'll face righties more often, so this card is maybe better than it looks on paper. Again, the knock on him is that he can only play first base, and he's actually really slow. 24 speed can be possibly detrimental at times. This is a card that is more than serviceable, but I think I'm pretty sad if I get him out of my random non-sellable pack. Going from being disappointed to being stoked, now we're looking at Devin Williams, who is the best reliever card in this release, in my opinion, even above Chapman. This card is completely ridiculously insane. I think he should be everyone's closer if you have him. Obviously, we can look at the hits per nine and K per nine, but the pitch mix is what really does it for me. I've seen a lot of people on social media talk about how this card won't be very good because he basically only throws 2 speeds, but based on the movement and the timing windows of those off-speed pitches that he throws, I think I have to disagree. Even just simply looking at the dynamic of throwing a 4-seam at 96 and a cutter at 83, and they look exactly the same out of the hand, it's going to be giving people fits. And on top of that, you've got the circle change, which is the same speed as the cutter but breaks in a different direction, so obviously tunneling is going to be really strong between circle change and cutter. And he's got a mid-80s screwball, which we learned from Valenzuela last year is extremely strong because the timing window is so weird. It feels like you have to swing way earlier. In order to get good timing on an 83 screwball, you have to swing so much earlier than you do to get good timing on an 83 circle change, and that's why I think the speed differentials or lack of for this card are a bit misleading. All that is to say, in my opinion, people who say this card aren't going to be good are coping, especially with how high his per nines are compared to the contact of most hitter cards in the game right now. I think if this guy walks out at you in the 9th inning and you're losing, you're gonna be sweating. Such a good launch day reliever card, man. Can't stress it enough. On to another card who is so good, BRYAN Reynolds, a fan favorite, especially with his finest card from last year. Extremely balanced splits, good contact and good power versus right, kind of becomes more of a contact hitter versus left, and then you can play him in the corner outfield with a gold shield at parallel 1, which takes no time at all. Extremely balanced card, again, one of the best outfielders in the game right now. There's so many of them in this release, and this card is really going to have to make you make a decision between, do I want one of the best relievers who's barely going to play, and do I want a card like this which is going to play every inning for me? This division is a tough one for the choice pack for sure. Finally, we have Tommy Edman, who's another weird card. I think this is a pretty solid card all around, except for the fact that he has no power versus right, which is a big bummer. Again, you're facing righties more often, so most of the time this is going to be a slappy boy for you, which is maybe not ideal even at launch week. But as far as everything else goes, he's amazing. Looking at him defensively, he gets diamond defense in 6 different positions, and also 88 speed to improve that defense, and he's a switch hitter, and he hits lefties really well. This is a solid to good card for me that just is an unfortunate division. Alright, going over the last division with these packs, I think this division is emotionally charged, but maybe not so much as the last one. All 5 of these cards have some use. You're obviously most disappointed if you get Votto, but even still, if you start him against a righty, it's going to be a good card. Stroman and Edman have their place. They're not top tier cards in the game right now, but they are serviceable. And then obviously, if you get Devin Williams or BRYAN Reynolds, you're jumping for joy. And for the choice pack, this is a really ambiguous one. I do think BRYAN Reynolds is a top tier option for the outfield, especially for no money spent players right now, but I spent a lot of time talking about how Williams is probably the best reliever. So again, the decision is up to you. Do you want to take a lockdown closer that's not going to see the field very often, but when he does, you're going to feel confident in him, or do you want to take an amazing outfielder that's going to play every single inning for you? Personally, I'm praying that I get my non-sellable as Devin Williams, but if I don't, he's going to be the choice pack for me. I do think you should keep the card from this division. I think having Devin Williams and Chapman in my bullpen right off the rip is incredibly strong, and I'll be able to figure out my outfield situation without Reynolds. However, if I get non-sellable Devin Williams, then I'm definitely taking BRYAN Reynolds. Alright, and that's going to do it for the video. I hope it was helpful for you guys. Let me know if you have any questions or comments down below. Let's do a quick recap of each division and my opinions. For the AL West, you're pretty happy about literally any of the 5 cards getting it non-sellable, and for your choice pack, my choice is SEAGER, but you could go with SEAGER, TROUT, or Kyle Tucker. For the NL West, which is the weakest division, I'm pretty sad if my non-sellable is Carson Kelly or CJ Cron. I'm pretty happy if it's Cody Bellinger or Logan Webb. I'm pretty okay if it's Jake Cronenworth. And for my choice pack, I'm taking Logan Webb, but you could definitely make the argument to just sell the card from this division. For the AL East, I'm okay if my non-sellable is Wander Franco or ALEK MANOAH. I'm over the moon if my non-sellable is Chapman or Mullins, and I'm feeling pretty good if it's Devers. And for the choice pack, my personal pick is Aroldis Chapman, but you could definitely make the argument for Mullins or Devers. The NL East is another division where you're happy with any of the 5 non-sellable cards that you get, so this will be a fun pack to open. And for the choice pack, I'm picking and keeping Jazz Chisholm for sure, but you can make an argument for Lindor or Acuna in my opinion. For the AL Central, the most emotionally charged non-sellable pack, you're over the moon if you get Buxton, if you get Robert, if you get CLASE. You're feeling okay if you get Mize, and you're feeling like a really sad boy if you get Benintendi. And for the choice pack, I'm picking and keeping Byron Buxton, but you can make an argument for CLASE and Robert as well. And for the last division, the NL Central, I'm pretty sad if I get VOTTO. I'm feeling okay if I get Stroman or Edman for my non-sellable. I'm over the moon if I get Devin Williams or Bryan Reynolds for my non-sellable. And for my choice pack, I'm picking Devin Williams and keeping him, and I think you could make the argument to do the same for Bryan Reynolds if you're so inclined. Alright, and that's everything. I hope that was enough information to help you guys make a decision. Would very much appreciate you dropping a like on the video and subscribing for more content. Thanks so much for watching all the way to the end, and if you would like to, down in the comment section below, I'd actually love to hear who you are picking out of the AL West pack, since I think that is one of the toughest decisions. Take care, and I'll see you guys in the next one.